Welcome to the Hard Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
And this is the Hard Won Wisdom Podcast. Okay, Michelle, what did you think of our next guest?
She is amazing. Like, I was so inspired the entire time. I mean, how long did we record? For 2 hours instead of one?
No, because we want to be her best friend. People, her name is Brooke Whipple, and I found her on YouTube. Her channel's amazing. She's an adventurer, and she builds off-grid cabins in the woods, and she's been on reality TV because she can go for weeks and survive on her own, like living off the land. But didn't you find, Michelle, that it was so much more inspiring than you would have expected, because it was like this huge confidence boost?
Absolutely. I think, I don't aspire to camp out for 4 months and with away from civilization. But what was so powerful in that conversation was how strong we are, but we let our head get in the way of us believing it and leaning in and experiencing life at this bigger, more fulfilling place. And I think that's what I walked away with, was just like, I'm too small. I'm thinking too small.
Yeah, it was really great. She's got it. She's got a lot of ideas on how you take risk, bet on yourself, confront your fears, and go it alone. Also, I thought it was interesting listening to how she's been able to carve out such a good independent life with a husband that understands who she is and that she needs that space for herself. So I thought there was so much in it, and I think everybody's gonna love this one.
I agree. Don't miss it.
Yeah, don't miss it.
Hey y'all, I'm Brooke Whipple. I'm an adventurer and enthusiast of the outdoors. What I like to tell people is get outside and get happy, and that's kind of the mantra I live by. And I'm a joy miner. I'm mining for joy every day.
I love Brooke Whipple. I mean, I am so glad you're here with us. I am famous for some of the rabbit holes I go into on YouTube, but I found her. She's an adventurer and does things that I wouldn't even think to do. And I'll do a few crazy things out there, but
You're
boy,
pretty crazy, Fawn.
But she makes me look like a wimp, doesn't she? I mean, and so I was so excited to get her on the show. She's actually even been on the History Channel's program Alone, and did the one season with her husband, which, boy, that was rugged and rough. And then she went back for more misery and went to Mongolia by herself. So, Brooke, welcome. And
thank you so much. Nice to meet both of you.
It's so fun to meet you. She's coming to us live from her car up in Michigan at one of her places. She lives the life, and her YouTube channel is Girl in the Woods, right? And
yes,
and she's just always doing something fearless, which is a theme that I know will resonate with other people, because she can show us how to go out there and do things alone. But Brooke, just to start, how were you raised? And then tell people a little about how you live.
I grew up in rural Michigan. So my dad was a police officer and definitely an outdoorsman. And I think I came out of the womb wanting to be an adventurer, an explorer, and just living in an environment where you've got, lots of opportunity to get outside and explore the forest, explore the land, and just wander, before internet. Thank goodness I didn't have internet. It was just a wonderful way to just grow up, hunting, fishing, trapping. It was the lifestyle of the area I grew up in. And so it really just sunk deep into my bones. And of course, hanging out with my dad was wonderful. I remember, being together, getting deer together that, we shot and processed. And so just stuff like that. I loved the outdoors and just knew I just wanted to get to the mountains in the wilderness in Alaska and just find a way to make that, what I did.
And what are some of the more far-reaching things that you have done?
I did get to go to Alaska the very first time with some family friends. They had a son in the Coast Guard, and they said, "Hey, do you want to come visit us when we go to visit him in Alaska? Go with us." And I said, "Oh, absolutely." So at 19, got to take my first plane ride and go to Alaska. And of course, I was in love with it. We spent 10 days and just, I couldn't believe it. So that got cemented in me that that's definitely what I needed to do. But before I did that, I was in community college, but I was feeling so stuck. I was just hating what I was doing. I wasn't inspired, and I was in the same area, in the same town I grew up in, and I just wanted out. So I told my best friend, we need to do something. And one day I was walking through the hall of the community college and saw this flyer for get a job at Yellowstone National Park. And I thought, yes, we need to do that. So I called my best friend. I said, "We're going to get jobs at Yellowstone. Come on, we're going to apply." So we both applied. We both got jobs at Yellowstone. And that was my very first road trip to go west from Michigan to Alaska, or to Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, seeing the mountains for the first time, but spending that entire summer just hiking and working and making friends. And it was just amazing. Walk out your front door, you got to look both ways for the buffalo. It was awesome. And that really kickstarted the whole just adventure part of me. And after that, I went and I was a lift operator at a ski resort, Vail, Colorado. And then I went to Montana, and I was a firefighter, a wildland firefighter for a while, just taking in the West, just doing the whole thing. Then I finally got to get back to Alaska. I just decided I'm just going to go. I'm going to pack my bags. I bought a plane ticket, a one-way plane ticket. I had a backpack, $200, no job, no plan. But I thought, I've been there before. I could figure it out. So I landed in Anchorage Airport about 2 a.m, slept on the floor till morning, caught a shuttle to Homer, which was where I had been before. And I asked the shuttle bus driver, do you have any idea where I should sleep tonight? All I have is a tent or whatever. He's like, well, there is this bed and breakfast, and she's got like a bunk room. It's $15 a night, and you can get a breakfast in the morning. The last cheapest deal I ever got in Alaska, by the way. You won't find that. So stayed there a couple nights. I got to know the owner, and I said, "Hey, let me work out a deal with you. I'll do whatever you want me to do if you just let me camp on your property. Like, I'll help in the bed and breakfast. I'll do whatever. We'll just do this trade." She liked me enough. She said yes. So basically, I had a place to live, and I had a pseudo job, but it didn't pay. So then I was down to about $50. I bought a bike for $50. Got my butt on the bike and got another job on the Homer Spit, which is a piece of land that goes out into Ketchikan Bay, at a sports shop selling everything but rockets and mortars for killing fish. And there's my money job. So I had a place to live. I had 2 jobs within 2 weeks, and the rest is history. That just really sparked a lifetime of adventure.
So, Brooke, okay, most people I know, they have to plan everything in advance. They build their agenda. They know exactly where they're going to stop when. You just started out with this winging it. And I think a lot of people don't do that because they fear the unknown, or what if I run into a crazy person? Like all these things that keep you from just living. What the heck have you found by just like I said, winging it and showing up and saying, "Let's see where this takes me"? What are some of the things that you've learned from that?
Well, first of all, you will run into crazy people and you will face the unknown, but I don't know, it's how I roll. I don't like to make plans because I think plans are always going to let you down. They're always going to be less than you think they are. Like, why not just roll with no plans? I feel like if you go up to the edge of the cliff without a safety net and jump, you're more likely to make it, because if you have a safety net, you won't jump. But if you just go for it with no plan B, you don't have a plan B, so you have to make it work. So a lot of people pad themselves with all of these plans and these things that are actually setting you up to be a failure. Whereas if you just kind of wing it and give yourself no out, that's where you kind of fly, because you can't fail.
Wow.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
You have referred to your life for us as a fairy tale. Why? And then also mention your husband in this, where he plays.
Yeah, if you would have told me where I'd be at right now in my life, doing all of the things I love, which, like, right now at home, because I'm not traveling to all of my exotic fun locations, which are the remote wilderness locations, because my daughter just graduated. I have a mom in assisted living, so I can't get away as much as I'd like to anymore. Sometimes there's things that hold me back, but my homeland, like, I can still do something there and have that sense of being outside and that adventure. So right now I'm making this, like, secret campsite on my property, because I have found this grass that's like 8 feet tall. And then I found these vines on the edge of the forest, and I found these awesome, like, downed logs. And all I could think of is, like, I need to camp here. So, like, I'm making this campsite, fairy tale campsite, in my backyard area, just because I want to. And I film it and I get paid to do that. And, like, nothing can stop me from doing that. That's like my job. I'm thinking about building a cabin here in a month or so. And
By
so,
yourself.
yeah, and so I just have all of these things that I can do. I feel like this is how I live my life. Like, I'm an adult and I make forts in the woods and I get paid.
Well, but there's somebody else in your life too that gives you the space to do things on your own as well. So where
Yeah.
where is Dave in this?
Yeah, so absolutely. I met my husband. Um, we've been married 23 years now, and we're both very similar in the fact that we're very independent, and we love the self-sufficiency of doing things on your own, whether it's a big project together or a project independently, like figuring something out by yourself, not calling a repair guy, like, not calling people for help, like, figuring things out. It kind of gets in your blood and you don't know how to operate any other way. So we both are the same that way. You just want to do it yourself. You want to figure things out. But he gives me a lot of space to do, he rolls his eyes all the time at all my little plans and the things I'm doing, but he lets me do it. And then he's like, wow, babe, good job. And I give him the same space. It's like, we're not calling each other constantly. We're not, like, bugging each other, but of course we have a huge respect for each other. I would never, like, do anything uh, that he didn't approve of, or, like, something so crazy. But we give each other a lot of space, and we love the outdoors. We love building cabins and love the wilderness and exploring, and kind of that whole homesteading off grid thing is like our gig. You know, we just love seeing a piece of land and seeing the possibilities and making it happen with your own hands. It's incredibly satisfying.
You'll go out there and do anything. I mean, I think the first time I ever saw you, stop me if I'm wrong on this, it was snowing, and I think you were camping under a tarp, right? And you had a little fire out in front of it. Something I would never even think of going. And what scares you? There are bears and things out there. There are people who would never do it. And this is really a metaphor for not people who are holding themselves back from going out in the woods in the cold and doing something, but really afraid to try anything. So there are real things that could kill you out there. So what scares you? How do you put your fear in check? And what makes you okay to do this by yourself?
The truth is, everything should scare you. It's not that it's not scary, it's how you handle it. I think you have to get to a point where you have to just be okay with the risk. And there's risk in everything. So, what scares me? Storms scare me. I've had some really bad situations and storms in Mongolia. I was in, you're in a debris shelter, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a shelter that you've made from sticks and leaves and branches. And maybe there's a tarp involved, maybe not. But I heard this storm coming at nighttime. It sounded like a freight train coming. I could hear it from miles away, and it's bearing down. It's coming right at me. And I'm like, if my shelter comes down in the middle of the night, you have to deal with it. There's no one there to help you. So you have to just live the moment, right? And hang on. And then assess what happens at the other end of it, but don't overthink it. Like, if you just constantly obsess about what could happen, you'll never do anything. That being said, bears are real. Human predators can be real. I'm a woman camping alone. I go on state land all the time, public lands. I don't know who I'm going to run into. So in preparation for stuff like that, I've educated myself, I've prepared myself. And here's there's two aspects of it. There's a physical preparation, and then there's a mental preparation. Now, physical, I'm very strong. I work out, I take care of my body. I also carry either a firearm or bear spray, depending on where I'm at and what I'm doing. And that's could be for humans. I've never had an opportunity where I needed to feel threatened by someone. But I am prepared to take care of myself. I'm not relying on anyone else. And that really is the key when you're out by yourself. Number two is a visualization. And this stuff really works. Before I went to Vancouver Island and got dropped by a helicopter into the middle of a wilderness I'm not familiar with, that has cougars, it has bears, it has wolves. First thing I wanted was a shelter. But before that, I had to sit down in my mind and go through all of the scenarios that were threatening me in my mind. What am I going to do if a bear comes into camp? What am I going to do if that bear puts his paws on my shelter? What am I going to do if it starts to come in at me, right? So in my mind, I worked through all of these scenarios, decided how I was going to handle it. I walked myself through, this situation, and I resolved it. And I'm still alive. And so now I get dropped in the middle of the wilderness by a helicopter with no shelter, no nothing. I already know I can handle that. And I'm not hippy dippy, like woo woo, that kind of stuff, but that works. Visualization works. So actually thinking about what you would do if someone strange walked up onto you in the wilderness, how you're going to handle it, it works. Not only that though, but you have to be educated. How do bears react? How should you react? What kind of firearm should you use? Do you practice with your firearm? Do you practice with your bear spray? So there is a mental and a physical aspect of the actual preparation to kind of deal with that.
That's training.
Yeah. And just I've done it for so long. I'm never not aware. I don't take things for granted. Anything can happen at any moment. The other thing I don't do, I do not watch any horror movies. I don't read horror stories, because once you get something into your mind, you will never unsee that. You will never unthink that. So you have to guard your mind. It's the best thing you've got going for you out there when you have to think through things. So it's a two-part, preparation.
Yeah. So you also said something earlier about your fairy tale life, that you chose this path of most resistance. I would love for you to elaborate on that.
Well, I think when you tell anyway, think in your mind you're going to maybe be like a camper or an explorer, an adventurer for like what you want to do for life, you're going to face a lot of opposition. People aren't going to think that's possible. I didn't think it was possible. I initially started going to college to be like an elementary school teacher, and then I changed to be a conservation officer. Nothing was sticking. And I kind of did my thing out west, and I circled back around. I found out I could get a degree in outdoor adventure recreation management. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's what I need to be doing. So I actually did get my bachelor's degree, and that opened some doors for some kind of employment, like through the government. I've worked for the U.S. Army, and I've worked for private corporations and resorts and the Girl Scouts and, different entities where that kind of a degree matters, even though you can get that kind of experience elsewhere. But really, it kind of needed to put a stamp of approval on it to say, okay, you are kind of like this outdoor professional. So it was a little point of validation, but really not needed. But to say that I could, I've gotten paid to go canoeing and kayaking and skiing and, riding an ATV at 60 miles an hour, snow machine, like I'm kicking it and I'm getting paid to do this. And then you factor in YouTube, which now I don't have any schedule. I can do whatever the heck I want in that kind of a vein. It's a fairy tale life, no doubt about it.
But what is the path of most resistance? And then how do other people learn to lean into that?
The path of most resistance is your mind, and what other people think. And what other people think is probably the worst. So, I mentioned my dad was a cop. And when I told him I was going to Alaska with a backpack and no job and no plans, he was pretty brutally honest with me about what he thought about that. And I love my dad and respect him so much. The thought that I was disappointing him, and actually he really feared for me and my safety, because he just sees the worst in the world. I had to choose to go against his wishes, his thoughts, his for his only daughter. I kind of had to go, you know what, Dad, I still got to go. And that hurt me and it hurt him, but I still had to do it. And at the end of the day, he was so proud of me and everything I did, getting up there and finding my way and doing all of that. But you're going to have naysayers for everything you want to do. And sometimes maybe you shouldn't give people your big dreams. You should just go do it, because as soon as you vocalize things, you're going to have a opposition, especially if it's kind of out of the box. And that's pretty much the only way I like to operate, is out of the box. So, living in a tent, living off grid, it's not normal for people to live in tents. It's not normal for people to live in their car or their van or whatever. So when you start kind of doing these fringe activities, people are going to give you a little bit of pushback. And so you just got to be like, I just don't care. I'm going to go do it. And so if there's no opposition, it's probably too easy.
Wow. And I think a lot of times people keep waiting for permission to live their lives. So even if they don't ever want to live in a tent or do anything like that, they're afraid to do anything that's going to upset expectations. And what you're saying is, forget that, live your life.
Fawn, you are so right. I mean, I hear every day in my comments from people and emails and messages that they want to do this. Like they've suddenly had a light bulb come on and feel like they've missed out on parts of their life. And now they want to go for it and live. And I always feel like I want to give them permission to do it. And like they need that permission. Women especially sometimes need that permission to kind of be a little more independent, especially a married woman. And it's respectful to your spouse, of course. There is a fine line, but also you need to step out of the shadow a little bit and gain that independence by doing something. And sometimes it feels a little radical if you've lived in a box a long time of your life. And so, yeah, you need that permission to go, yeah, you're stronger than you think. You're smarter than you think. You can do way more than you think. And nothing teaches you more than that, than starving on an island for 7 weeks. But, your everyday needs are pretty basic. And beyond that, you can do so much more than you think you can. You're capable of so much.
What's that big daunting goal that you see in front of you that you think about but haven't tackled yet?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's the solo cabin. It's the solo cabin build. I mean, I just have gotten all the pieces together. We just got this piece of land. I found an amazing spot along the river. I've got a cut trail in for the ATV. I just bought a little trailer for my ATV. Like, I'm putting all the pieces together. I was talking with my husband about the foundation and how I should do it. And it's going to be all me. Like, I remember wanting to play guitar, and it seemed like this most daunting thing. I remember learning how to ride a motorcycle. There's these certain little, like, I didn't know I could do that, or I talked myself out of thinking I could do that. And when it really, on the other side of that, you're like, yeah, I could totally do that. Like, I know how to do that. And even if you don't, if you can figure it out in the process, oh man, does that just make you feel like you can go to the moon? So yeah, the solo cabin is my next big do. Last fall, I finished the inside of a cabin completely by myself.
It was beautiful.
Thank you. I didn't know what I was doing. So that is kind of like that. I think people think that I already knew how to do that.
I thought you did.
No, I'd never put any tongue and groove in or cut
Wow.
this or like, you just got to do it. And in the process, I made mistakes. It's like, oh, next time I'll have to do it a different way. Like, I learned and maybe messed up a couple boards and stuff. And oh, well, like, that's part of the process. I'm just not afraid to try. I think that's the thing.
So many people are afraid to do it alone, and it takes a lot of confidence. And the last 3 years are really the only 3 years I've been out of a relationship in forever. And I think a lot of people stay in bad situations because they don't want to be alone. And what I have learned in that is it is so much fun. I get to be in charge of everything. I make all these decisions. I wish I had known it was so fun. It is going to take a whole lot for me to give that up. What gives you the courage to be alone? And like you said, facing bears and weirdos out there. I don't know. Have you encountered them in situations? And, what is it that says, okay, I do have the confidence and know how to be here and do everything by myself?
Yeah, I've definitely had situations that have, woke you up for sure and scared you. Back to Alaska when I was living on that property of the B&B owner, there was a drunk man I could hear coming and approaching my tent one evening. And I was quite young, so I didn't have a lot of experience yet. And I thought, you know what? I need to get out of here because I just heard somebody being belligerent and getting too close to my space on her property. So I went into the bed and breakfast, and I think we ended up calling the police. And it was just this drunk guy wandering around. That's the only human encounter I've ever had that was like a weird thing. But I've definitely had bear in camp. I had 2 women come up to Alaska to do kind of an intensive survival training with me for 5 days. And we canoe to an island, and then you're on the island. And it's full of bear country. And so I was hanging all of our food one night, and I look over and there's a black bear coming right up the trail, right towards the ladies where they're sitting, and I'm hanging the food. So you got to make decisions really quick. And it all ended fine. The bear was on the island with us for about 2 nights. I mean, you could physically sense its presence. We saw it a couple more times. It tipped over. Luckily you're doing everything right. You're cooking in an area and you're sleeping in a different area. It followed us That night, those ladies, I had wanted them to do their own solo. And so they had established their camps and made shelters. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that now. We need to all be together. So they had to go retrieve their stuff. One of them dropped her knife on the way there. And so we're looking for that. And I found it, and the bear had chewed the knife. So it had circled back and followed us after our initial encounter. So it was just kind of hanging around, and when you're responsible for people who are with you as like a leader, those are intense moments, but at the same time, those were huge teachable moments, because here these ladies were there to learn about all this stuff. And now they've just seen how I processed a bear encounter and how we're going to still process a bear encounter until it leaves the island, because we still have to be there.
Well, that's such a great point, because I imagine, right, these are ladies who, this is a new experience for them. They're afraid. You as that leader, you have a choice, right? You can either handle it, everything's great, or you can show the vulnerability of, hey, this is how I problem solve. And I think about that and translating it back to business is leading people, especially for women. Sometimes we think about, oh, I can't let them see any of the cracks, right? I got to always have it together, and I always have to have the answers. And I'm curious how to sort of translate that back to that experience you had with these women, in how you led them through it and how they adjusted and reacted to your approach.
So an interesting part of that encounter was one of these women wants to be on alone. And I looked at her in the moment and I said, how are you feeling right now? Because if you were on the show right now and you would be completely alone dealing with this. I said, how are you feeling right now? Like, it was so powerful. Also, on the flip side of that, later on, she says, if you were here by yourself, what would you do? I said, I'd leave. There's no reason to be on an island with a bear. I said, especially if it was a grizzly bear, I said, we would have packed up right now and left. It was a black bear. There's a little bit different, characteristics between the two and how comfortable I feel. But I was being completely honest. Like, why? It's a 4-acre island. I mean, the bear had to swim to get there. It's got to swim to leave. And until then, it's on the island with you. And I'm like, I wouldn't stay here if I was alone, but we're together. There's strength in numbers. It's not that I didn't have firepower or whatever, but like, there's no reason to be on an island with a bear to like prove a point. No, that's just stupid. So I was showing my real self both ways. Like, this is how you handle it. And if I was alone, I'd leave, because there's just no reason to be there. Like, nothing is worth dealing with that feeling of a bear in close proximity. On the other hand, I had a similar bear encounter in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan with some young girls that I was in charge of. Same thing. Like, it got into my pack. I threw rocks at it. It left for the night. And I'm like, circle tents up so I can see everybody at 6 o'clock in the morning, like, because I had left like my tent open so I could see everything. I sat straight up in my tent, and that bear was walking right in front of my tent screen. Like, my sixth sense like woke me right up, and everything was fine. The bear was just passing through.
Oh
But when you're in charge of people, in charge of their safety and well-being, I mean, it takes it to a whole nother level. And it's good to be vulnerable, and it's good to be strong. There's room for both.
Michelle, do you totally hear the similarities of everything and doing what you have to do in a corporate world as a leader, and then also, knowing when you have to pack it up and move on and change course and all of that stuff? I mean, it's just there. I guess there's a bear in every part of our lives at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every part. I know that, I've been in work situations where I'm like, this is not a good environment for me. And what were my commitments to this? How long did I say I was going to do this? But listening to that spidey sense and not continuing to hang on, waiting and hoping and knowing whenever you have to cut ties. And I tell you, I coach a lot of other women on this. They just tend to want to hang in there and feel like it's failure to learn, know when to walk away. And I think you just raise a really great point of looking at the situation and saying, what am I trying to prove here?
Right.
Why do I feel like I need to prove something? So I think that's a really great reminder, life skill.
Yeah. Sometimes when I'm on stage, I'll tell a story about this kayaking trip in the Everglades. And this is in the 10,000 Islands. So this is by the sharks, not by the alligator part of the Everglades. And we just had this real douchebag as our guide. And he got us lost. And we are just out there forever. And it's not looking good. I mean, we're in the last minutes of light of day.
Wow.
And the conditions are so horrible. And I remember having that moment where I said, okay, God, if this is what you have in mind for how I'm supposed to die, I'm okay with that because it beats lingering and suffering. And it's like, but if not, you need to do something right now. And just then we saw an island. But really, Brooke, the way you have lived is kind of the same way that I have this philosophy is that there's no regrets. Like if you died tomorrow, could anybody say there was something you didn't do that you needed to do?
Yeah, and I just had that conversation with my husband. And I'm like, oh, great, I'm going to get struck by lightning now. Because I have no regrets. There's nothing I haven't wanted to do that I haven't done yet. Except climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I'd really like to do that. But, that's small potatoes.
Right.
I'm so happy and enjoy, I was walking through the woods yesterday and there was just this butterfly kind of I just love simple things that just make me happy. It takes so little to make me happy. And simple joy is overrated. Like every little awesome thing you can see in your daily life that just makes you smile, you should really try to notice those things more, and surround yourself with good people too.
Yeah.
Because that's contagious.
So grounding.
Well, so tell me I see you do these retreats. So if I'm a lady that wants to, get out of my comfort zone and really recognize my own power and strength, do I have to be 25 in the best shape? I mean, who can do this? Who should say yes?
I mean, sure, there are physical things that I personally do. But I think what I do with other women is strictly give them this free pass to just start living. And what that is just coming out and maybe learning how to build a debris shelter, how to make a fire with just a spark, how to just sit still for 30 minutes in the woods and just soak it all up. I don't know. It just opens your mind and your world to possibilities. It is a total metaphor of life that you can just kind of do anything. It's like once you've learned how to do a fire and build a shelter, and sometimes maybe it's sleep alone in the woods. I mean, that's a huge one for so many people.
Yeah.
And as somebody that says they're not scared of that is completely not being truthful, because I don't think there's a person on earth who can put themselves in the middle of unfamiliar woods and not feel at least one tinge of the unknown and fear, because you're going to hear sounds all night long that you don't know what they are. And if you have my goofy dog with you who barks at everything, and funny because about 3 nights ago, she did this at home and there's 2 black bears right outside the front door. So
You run from bears or do you what do you I'm dying to ask this question because you always have not that I run into any bears every day, but what do you do? Do you make yourself bigger? Do you shrink? What do you do?
yeah, for black bears, it's like, hey, get out. Anything you can do to be bigger is good. Both species of bears react differently and you need to react differently. Bears in general, you want to be big and try not to make eye contact, but be big and make noise. But, grizzly bears, brown bears, they're a bit different. They're going to defend their territory and their babies way more aggressively than a black bear. So like if you got one of those bearing down on you, you would just drop down and try to protect your head and neck. You never want to run, of course, from either species of bear. But if a black bear is kind of coming after you, you'd want to fight back. Start punching them in the face and gouging their eyes and stuff like that.
I have a few bosses that remind me of both grizzlies.
Yes. Yeah. So, the best case scenario, the bear doesn't want to tangle with you either. And it's going to the response you want to see is their butt hightailing it away from you. So like when we were on the island with those ladies, that bear did not react like I wanted it to. I did not like how it reacted at all. It was just like, nah, I don't really care. And I'm just going to maybe move over a little bit. And I'm knowing it's on this island with us. And that's not a cool reaction. I want to see them shoot right off. And we've been there before. I've had black bear in camp there before, but you don't want them to react like that. And that's not an indication of it being like comfortable around people. I mean, every bear has its own personality, and that's a problem too. You read Stephen Herrera's book, Bear Attacks, Their Causes and Avoidances, and you read all like this book and you take it all in. And like the last 2 pages, he says, so in conclusion, what we can say is like every bear it has its own characteristics and every encounter is its own thing. And you're like,
there's no answer. The answer is there is no answer.
The answer is, deal with it in the moment. But yeah, you do need to learn the differences between how to react between a grizzly and a black bear. And a lot of times you go to national parks, and if there's a bear presence there, they're going to make you like sit through bear training. I knew they do that in Denali National Park before they're going to give you a backcountry permit and stuff like that. But it's definitely something to look into. It's fascinating and terrifying subject, but it's probably better to know than not know. But firepower, bear spray, and knowledge, those all are really handy.
Yeah, and awareness, which sometimes I'm blissfully ignorant when I'm out there, and that's not good.
Right, and just knowing, don't eat in camp and don't have smells on you and stuff in your tent, stuff like that. So all that's important too.
I got a lot more I want to ask you in the after show. Michelle, I know you're probably getting ready to wrap the podcast. So for those members of the Women's Leadership Network, we're going to talk about how you dealt with so much time on your hands when you did those really long solo things on TV and the reality of all that. And I just have loved talking to you. So Michelle.
It's been amazing. So a couple of things that really stood out to me in hearing your story was I love the fact that just take away the plan B, because whenever you remove all of the options, you've just got to figure it out. So you got to, you got to fly. I also, again, just the reminders of living in the moment. You don't have to have all the plans. Live in the moment and appreciate it, and then seek the joy in those small, quiet times, because it's all around you. I think the last one that I'd mention right now would be, I paraphrase a little bit, but sometimes you just got to show your dreams instead of telling people your dreams, because you keep the odds stacked in your favor that you're going to achieve what it is you set out to, and not be distracted by a lot of the noise that people, the naysayers or the obstacles that you could get. So, I mean, obviously just spending this time with you, I feel a little less fearful, and I'm sitting here thinking about, this is a big milestone birthday for me, and I know it is for you this year as well. And I'm really trying to figure out what do I want to tackle, but I know I want it to be something that is challenging to me and pushes me. And I thank you for sharing your story, because I think it's really going to speak to a lot of our listeners for sure. And I'm anxious to see what it is they deliver in terms of their own personal success. So thank you very much.
Yeah, Brooke, thank you. You are awesome.
Thank you guys. This has been a really fun chat. And yeah, that's so great. Show your dreams and yeah, make it happen. It's wonderful.
Thank you for joining the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.